And today, because we're talking about tourism, we'd like to take our audience and our viewers to some of these areas that we think, we share a little bit of, being both ancient civilizations. So why don't we start on our journey? I'd like to begin actually with our nation's capitals, Beijing and New Delhi.
Yes.
Now, of course, they wouldn't be capitals if there wasn't a historical reason behind it. Can you tell me New Delhi's place in Indian history?
Well, Delhi is basically from the word Dehli, which means threshold. Threshold. In many senses, the threshold of India.
Okay.
And so that is the importance of Delhi.
Right.
And if you go to Delhi like you do in Beijing, you are witness to the history of India over so many centuries, many centuries.
What are some of the famous sites in New Delhi?
Well, you have the Qutub Minar, which is a minar. You've heard of the word minaret.
Right.
Yeah, it comes from the word minar. We have the Red Fort, which is a Mughal period.
We see a picture. That's the Red Fort.
The Red Fort. Red sandstone. A lot of Delhi's important historical buildings, and including the newer buildings constructed in the early 20th century, are made from red sandstone.
Right.
So the Red Fort is one of the sights to see. Then we have one of the more recent buildings is the Lotus Temple, which is a Baha'i temple, which is a very, very impressive piece of architecture also.
Right.
I can't even stop.
It's an endless list of things that you can go see. Right.
List of things to see.
And when you talk about New Delhi, it does make me think a little bit about our home here in Beijing, because Beijing, of course, has a very important role in history of China.
Exactly.
And it goes back to about 3,000 years ago. Beijing was the seat of power for 6 dynasties in China, starting with the Yan in Xizhou. And so Beijing also, like New Delhi, has palaces like the Forbidden City. We have temples. There are definitely a lot of similarities, especially when I went to go visit India. Do you see any similarities between Beijing and New Delhi?
Oh, so many. We just referred to the history of the two cities, the fact that so many important events in our two countries' histories have happened in Delhi and Beijing, from ancient times to our modern histories. Delhi and Beijing have seen so much happen. Just to be, living there, I think is very, very special. And they're the capitals of our two countries. They represent the aspirations of 2 billion people between them.
Absolutely.
So I think they're both very, very important. And it is often said that the 21st century cannot be an Asian century without India and China.
Absolutely.
So Delhi and Beijing are very much a part of that.
Now, we couldn't really talk about tourism without talking about one of the most iconic monuments in the world, which is in India. Can you guess what monument I'm talking about?
I think it's Taj Mahal.
Yes, of course, the Taj Mahal. I know it's not just a beautiful structure, but it has a very strong historical significance. What does the Taj Mahal tell us about history in India?
Well, if you look at the monument right there, it's a wonderful symbol of what we call Indo-Islamic architecture. And it incorporates not only the Muslim influences and the Mughal touch in the building that you see. I mean, it's very, very emblematic of the splendor of Mughal rule in India. It's a monument of love. It was built when the queen, the wife of the Emperor Shah Jahan, the Empress Mumtaz Mahal, when she died, the emperor, who was very, very grief-stricken, wanted to build a monument in her memory.
Related to the Taj Mahal, in China, we also have a very important monument and tomb. And I think probably a few of you have probably been there. Have you been to Xi'an? How many of you have seen the terracotta soldiers? Raise your hands up high. I think the most impressive thing about both of these two areas or two monuments is that they were really engineering marvels, engineering feats.
Absolutely. And that passion for perfection.
Right.
And, the eye for detail.
Right.
I think those are really virtues that we can emulate.
Right. Now, of course, India is also the birthplace of many religions. And one of those things that came from India was Buddhism. from India, Buddhism spread to China as well as through the rest of the world.
That's right.
And China also had its own native religions and spirituality as well.
Yes, yes.
Taoism,
Exactly.
we have Confucianism, and some of this you can see as a tourist at places like Henan's Shaolin Temple.
Yes.
Now, which is very famous, I'm sure everybody knows, because of their martial arts masters. Have you guys heard about Shaolin martial arts? So there was a famous movie, Shaolin Soccer, which
Absolutely.
I'm sure a lot of people have seen.
And there is an Indian connection with Shaolin.
Is there?
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned it because in the 4th or 5th century after Christ, there was this Indian monk called Bodhidharma. And he came, he was believed, I believe, to be a prince of a royal family, but who became a monk. And he traveled to China by the southern Silk Route, by sea. He went to Java in Indonesia, and then he went to South China, and he wanted to move further. He felt he should go north, and that's how he landed up in Shaolin. And he meditated in Shaolin for long years, and I believe the temple in Shaolin still reveres his memory.
Right.
And he's called Damo in China. And he brought, it is said, he brought the martial arts of southern India to China, where of course you developed it,
and it was
into a Chinese tradition,
right.
Which is now the Kung Fu and what you have in Shaolin and in East Asia. So there is an India connection there.
There really is a connection, right? And that connection goes way back, as we talked about, because two ancient civilizations that are pretty close geographically. Of course, we're going to have a lot of interaction.
Precisely,
yeah.
Precisely. And I am so inspired by the memory of people like Xuanzang. He was a great ambassador of China to India in many senses. He was this learned Buddhist monk who traveled to India in the 7th century after Christ, 7th century AD.
There's really a strong connection.
That's right.
That goes way back.
China has given to India also because a lot of these traditions found their way into India through the Buddhist monks who traveled between the two countries.
Bringing them back, right.
Yes, so,
right.
And we have a lot of Chinese, the material culture of India has also been influenced by China. And in the south of India, a number of words we use have a Chinese origin.
Is that right?
A Chinese connotation. So there has been a give and take between
That's very
the two
fascinating.
countries, yes.
This is CCTV International's only live studio audience program. An active contributor, the studio audience adds additional perspectives to the guests' lives. Keep close to the ones you're so familiar with, yet so far away from. We welcome you to the up-close studio to meet the person you've been dying to know about. Why hesitate? Please log on to our website to find out more or contact us direct.
Now, we are again talking about tourism. We've shown you some of the tourist sites in both China and India. What's the current tourism like, the volume?
Well, at the moment, I think it's improving, certainly. We're seeing much more people traveling between the two countries. More Indians to China than Chinese to India, so we need to work more on getting more Chinese to visit India. But we had about, I believe, about 450,000 Indians coming to China last year. And we had about 50,000 Chinese going to India.
Right.
So we need to bring that figure up. And as I mentioned earlier, the number of flights between the two countries are also increasing. And we have a provision for, I think it's about 41 or 43 flights per week between the two countries under the air services agreement that the two governments have. So, so the potential is definitely there.
Right. I also want to touch on another point, this concept of yoga and what yoga is, the exposure that yoga is bringing to India. Because here in China, along with Indian cuisine, and there's quite good Indian cuisine, there is this phenomenon that is yoga. So many people are very excited. Chinese people are very excited to learn yoga because of all of its health benefits. Today, we also have a very special treat because we've invited an Indian yoga teacher here to demonstrate a bit of yoga for us today. So let's invite him onto the stage.